So in this talk, I will give you an insight on how the cooperation between MedTech companies and hospitals and healthcare workers works and what I learned over the years. So the rationale of cooperating between hospitals and MedTech companies are various. For instance, the stakeholders of advancing healthcare are patients, or let's say future patients, which means the public, healthcare professionals, companies, and hospitals themselves and their administration. Companies also need to know the need, what they want to develop, what actually healthcare people and the stakeholders need. And healthcare professionals themselves are eager to contribute to the advancement of healthcare and the technology. So there are different approaches of developing new products. Those at least which I experienced. Sometimes there's an engineer having an idea and a need or experiencing a need, tells the CEO or some admin person, it goes back to the engineer, then the clinician and the engineer. But this process can also be coming from the CEO, especially in smaller companies. A lot of the drive comes from CEOs themselves. And also in some instances, it comes from clinicians, especially at university hospitals, coming in programs involving students and clinicians, going to the engineers and to the companies. One problem I experienced is shown in this slide, which means the development ends at the clinician in the evaluation process and doesn't come back to the engineer. This is a common fault you experience during product development. So the company is developing something, showing to the clinician, and will tell them what can be improved or why it doesn't fit in your needs in a daily routine. They say, well, it's a released product now. So this is something I want to emphasize here, which should be not the routine in the future. Collaborating options between healthcare workers and companies of the MedTech sector are also different. There are early development consultings, which means the companies show you some prototypes or even some ideas which are very rough, and you tell them if you actually need this or in which direction they should put in focus on the development. There is prototype testing, of course, which means also early or late prototypes which are shown and evaluated in a structured way by the clinicians in a setup which is pretty close to the reality. There are also clinical studies which can come from the companies but also from the clinicians. Then it's called an IIT, an investigator-initiated trial. There are safety evaluations today from the new MDR regulations, meaning you need to have also assessments during the process of the use in the first year, so actually during the whole time of use of these products. Also the clinicians need to do safety evaluations of different products. So if there is any kind of product like an implant, there are big sheets of papers, like 130 pages for a plastic cage, for instance, clearly defining which patients are allowed to get it, which not. And the clinicians need to evaluate those, go through all these pages per product and tell what is wrong or right. And sometimes you step over things that, like a regular plastic cage, isn't allowed from the company itself to be put in a pregnant woman, for instance. So this is something where you stumble upon and say, well, but if such a patient has, for instance, a disc herniation and some pain in the arm, why are you not allowed to put this product in it? So that's a good example of this one. Then there are also initiatives coming from healthcare professionals which include also new applications of existing products, which I show you some examples later. And there are also visits of R&D teams from different MedTech companies coming to hospitals as part of the product, part of the support also when you buy this product, or also just by interest, they come and have a look at your workflow and how you use their product. And you can clearly tell them what's right or wrong or what can be improved. So this is a short overview on my own experience, which companies I consult or work with, There's, for instance, Carl MedTech, which I sometimes do prototype testings, show me early products, and I tell them what's my opinion and also how it can be used or not. There's also the same for a Finnish company, where we also have clinical studies which we do by our own initiatives, and we also have different uses of those products, which brings it forward. I will show you an example later. Then there's also an implant company called Ulrich Medical, where we do safety evaluations and clinical studies coming from the company itself. There's actually Stella Medical, which comes from a student's initiative, which I just helped to develop and guide them through the clinical application. And there's a big company, now it's the world market leader on neuronavigation actually, which is one of the biggest, fastest growing German companies, which I do prototype testing, clinical studies, but also have own initiatives on product developments. So here are 3 stories that you see how this can work. This is a regular brain, and when you look at this, you usually don't know which function is. You roughly know by anatomy, so in purple, for instance, there's your motor control, or in blue and yellow, there's your understanding and production of language. So there's one company which develops a kind of brain mapping tool, as I show you here. And what they actually do is you put a stimulator on the brain, they show you where it's stimulated, and they can show you then which muscle you move. And we took this system and brought it to something different, which is now this kind of application, which shows actually an individual patient's brain and the different locations of the language and motor function, and also of the fiber tract, so which means the cables going to the extremities and executing those functions. So coming from their product, we developed the applications further for our actually own need. Then there is also a combination. So this is actually a nice picture of one of our ORs where you see, for instance, a CT scanner on a sliding gantry which comes across the patient. It was actually the first installation in the world in this way from Philips. You see here a microscope from Zeiss, which is also brand new. It's a robotic microscope, which is navigated. And then you see on the left the BrainLab navigation system, which can actually track the microscope. And what we did is a combination of all those products which the manufacturers actually didn't think of. So we combined all those 3, which are still released products within the terms of application, which is always important from a legislative point. And what you can see here with the 3D goggles, you see here on the screen then actually your vertebra and also the trajectories, which are actually put on the skin of the patient, and you can look through the skin in a virtual way and see how you put screws in. And this is another cooperation we have with BrainLab. They developed 3 and 4 years ago a first step of a robotic system which allows you to put in screws in the spine, but also take biopsies from the brain. And it started with the left side, which is just a mechatronic holder, which helps and supports you, but it comes now with the active hand, which is on the right side. And what we did is we did early in the evaluation of this product, and also evaluated then further the robotic hand. Also, I went to cadaver labs where you see in human cadavers, you test those instruments, how it works, and also do the CE investigations showing the officials that this is an accurate product and works within its terms of application. And now this is a picture from our OR in the summer. We also have this product in our hospital and work with it. And what you actually see here is the 3D reconstruction of the spine, and it shows you exactly how to put the screw, and the robotic hand guides you to this. So from these experiences, I learned several obstacles. One is the compliance legislation, which is or can be something quite not limiting, but something you need to take care of. So from the employee side, you always need to be safe. You need to have an allowance from your employer that you can work like as an extra contract besides your working contract with some other company, and your employee will tell you how many hours a week you're allowed to do this in your spare time. And on the other side, the hospital also needs to prove that when they have cooperations between the manufacturers and the hospital, that the hospital doesn't have any kind of other advantage in pricing or whatever. And then, of course, if you do research, you always, under each publication, you have to have a big paragraph showing your conflicts of interest for which companies you consult, you develop. So it needs to be, everything needs to be very, very transparent. And then there's data protection legislation and data protection offices, which is in Germany a big problem in terms of new developments, because it is not totally clear sometimes what kind of facts actually harm the patient's rights on data protection. And the other issue is each data protection officer is independent. So from one hospital you can have a totally different decision than in the other hospital in terms of patient data protection, which means if you want to have a cooperation helping a manufacturer by imaging data, it is quite a problem, because A, the imaging data belongs to the patient, and B, it's not anonymous anymore. So there is like a big issue with anonymization of imaging data, that you actually can't anonymize it anymore. That's the MRI from a head with a face, that's clear, but even of a spine, today it's not defined as anonymous anymore. The other problem, of course, is hospital IT departments, because they have a lot of work anyway, and with side projects it needs to be something more in a structured way. So the whole hospital needs to have a pathway for industry cooperation, otherwise you will lose a lot of time working with the IT department because they have to squeeze it in their schedule. And the last point is a very crucial one. I think you already got educated in the EU MDR regulations, which will be a big problem for future products, because it's extremely expensive to get a CE marking for your future product, also for any study involving medical products actually. And also the further application of those products needs to be evaluated actually year by year. So lessons learned. As clinicians, it takes time to find out the helpful company employees as well. So it doesn't only help to speak with some person from a company. Usually you really need to find out which actually employees have open ears, or which are actually interested in your things, because if you talk only to an engineer who is interested in his product, it might be not the best idea telling him that you can't use this product at all. So this might be the wrong person. So that's the crucial point. The other thing is engineers need to see their product from a different perspective, from the clinician's perspective. So it's good to have an exchange, bringing engineers to your hospital and showing them what's your clinical need. Constructive feedback is usually welcomed by the right people, so by the right engineers, CEOs, CTOs, you name it. The most important questions usually are what does the clinician actually really need or want, and what does clinician does not need. This is also a crucial point. The other way is you need to think about what about the pricing. Every company wants to sell their product, so the way of reimbursement of a product is crucial, because especially in Germany you need to be differentiate between investment and consumables, because the money you take it from and the way you need to take to get a new tool or a new machine, whatever, is totally different. The other point is sales teams and R&D departments should always be close in companies. So if you have a properly set up MedTech company, the R&D department and the sales team need to be close to each other, work with each other, have your fix together, because actually the sales team usually knows much better what their customers need, as does the R&D team. And the last point, but not least crucial one, you should not forget 90% of employees of the healthcare sector, which means you shouldn't always only look at the doctors, but also at all other people working in a hospital, because they are sometimes forgotten and there's a big need, because they actually make 90% of the employees of a hospital. With this, I'm coming to the end of the talk. If you have any questions, I'm always open electronically or by any kind of contact. Thank you very much.